Chapter 3: The Overlord of Nadeshiko. In the following span of a few hours, events passed by rather quickly for Ain's old gown. Shizuka and Tokiwa gave him a tour around Nadeshiko's main segment, while also explaining the last hilltop connected to it by another bridge. After this, Shizuka began working her job, that is, using her authority as the village leader of Nadeshiko to make appointments, deal with paperwork, and assign subordinates to various tasks or missions. It was enlightening watching her work, with Tokiwa aiding her more like an assistant than an attendant. There was a difference between the two definitions. This allowed Suzuki Satoru to better understand the inner workings behind a ninja village and how each segment made up the whole of the village. While primarily the residential area for new generations, the lowest hilltop was also the central hub for trade and commerce. It held the vast majority of shops, warehouses, and restaurants, containing the majority of the village's foodstuffs that were not stored in emergency reserves. It was the front in which goods were sold to local and foreign consumers, also the primary location of imports and exports. The tallest hilltop was the central location for the village government, its head so to speak that contained the village hall which served as Shizuka's and other political members' seat of power. It was also a residential area for older generations, almost like privileged members. As well, it had several workshops, smiths, and other low industrial buildings for the creation of military tools and luxury goods. It was defended by kunoichi at all times, surrounded by walls, with towers reaching high for increased vantage points. Lastly, the remaining hilltop contained public services and government storage facilities. The only educational facility, the Nadeshiko Academy, was located here and under heavy guard. It had a surrounding wall, like the tallest hill, though not to the same scale as the central government location. The barracks were also located here, as well as the tower responsible for communication with other villages using messenger hawks. While some residents were living here, it held the lowest population. All three hills held significant importance to Nadeshiko village. But if Ains could tell there was a bias between them, the lowest hilltop had no walls or towers. While it did have patrolling kunoichi, it could be easily abandoned by the military forces at any time. The third hilltop, on the other hand, looked undeveloped in its infrastructure and lacked a solid population. And frankly, who puts the school and public services on the opposite end of where the population majority was? The meeting with the elders had not taken place, but rumors had already spread in the hours since his arrival about their engagement. It felt more like a corporate marriage, a practice where one corporate family member would marry into another to secure a foothold of potential assets. Shizuka had called for the elders, a time set for the introduction. In the meantime, while Shizuka worked, Ains set upon learning about the system used for the mercenary contracts, both by watching her interactions and paperwork as well as occasional questions. He forewent thinking it similar to the mercenary system used in Yggdrasil, instead, learning that it was like a commission made to the village to accomplish something, which explained why it was called missions rather than contracts. It wasn't exclusive to militant matters. It can be something as simple as finding a cat to complex deliveries of sealed information into hostile territory. The difficulty was strangely based on an English alphabet, but given how Japanese symbols were used for written language, not unsurprising other languages from Earth could exist here. The easiest ranked mission, which is also the least paying, was D rank, then proceeded with increasing difficulty to C, B, A, and finally S rank. The rank of a ninja, or in Nadeshiko's case, a kunoichi, is taken into consideration with mission assignments. A genin was the lowest rank, typically reserved for those newly graduated from Nadeshiko Academy, who can be promoted to chunin, then jonin, and finally the village leader jonin.
But, according to Shizuka, there are 5 great ninja countries, which each have a powerful ninja village with leaders called Kage.
Ains took a glance over to a hanging map nearby.
Nadeshiko village lies on a peninsula at the land of water's borders, separating it from the land of fire, which makes it under the land of water's jurisdiction, so Nadeshiko village's parent company would be considered the hidden village in the mist.
That meant the majority of high-ranked missions were monopolized by the Mist Village, likely leaving D to B ranks to Nadeshiko Village localized to the peninsula. But at the same time, the Mist Village financially supported Nadeshiko Village, as it served as a sizable front to the neighboring rival. Of course, the main governmental figure controlling the land of water was the Water Daimyo. But Ains doubted the daimyo's ability to fully control the ninja villages. More likely, the daimyo managed the general populace while the ninja villages held the actual militant power. This was based on Satoru's own experience with megacorporations on Earth, who had near total control of the governments, only really keeping them around to manage public services.
I don't know if there are any tradable resources around Nadeshiko.
Ains spoke aloud.
I'll need to look at the financials to see how much of the village's income is dependent on missions.
It wouldn't be easy, but asking for an assistant or two will make the process much quicker, and an abacus. It was a good thing Punitomo taught him how to use such an old version of the calculator. There was electricity. Nadeshiko had some modernization inside its buildings contrary to initial appearances. But the entire village didn't have access to the electrical grid, and devices with batteries were either non-existent or not commercially widespread, or Nadeshiko was just too isolated to attract traders with such products. There hadn't been any indication of automobiles, only carts drawn by horse and man. He'll need to know the technology level of this world outside of Nadeshiko, which might be behind compared to those great ninja villages mentioned before. There was also the concern as to the average level the great ninja villages held. Those Kage could be high-level individuals, but was that high level meaning above 60? Or did they match Ains, a level 100 player? There was a drastic difference between the two values in terms of PvP potential. A door opened nearby, revealing a kunoichi, who briefly entered the room and spoke.
The meeting is prepared. Shizuka requires you to meet with her. If you would follow me, I'll guide you.
Lead the way.
He wouldn't be able to tell the difference if the kunoichi was a chunin or jonin. According to Nadeshiko Village, those of chunin rank and above are given a standardized uniform to help differentiate them from other villages' ninjas. But Ains hadn't met any other foreign ninja outside of those men, and they were rogue according to Shizuka. Speaking of, they had mentioned possible assassins, but only after introductions to the elders. Still, Ains didn't let his guard down, not until he'd finished through this whole process and confirmed the loyalties of his would-be subordinates. The village leader, Shizuka, should be the strongest kunoichi in Nadeshiko, and by that logic, there shouldn't be anyone capable of harming him. But assumptions can lead to death. Ains didn't know whether the elders had a secret stronger hit team. Shizuka acknowledged him as he entered into view when turning the hall.
Lord Ains Oolgown.
You may refer me as only Ains, for ease, and remove the lord title between us,
he said, feeling that if they were to be married, they should at least be at a first-name basis. Wait, he'd been addressing her that way the whole time. Perhaps she had waited for his approval to do the same? She nodded.
The elders are present on the other side. Are you prepared?
I am.
He recalled the brief introduction that he'd come up with in the past hour. Nadeshiko Village's leader opened the door, and they both entered, leaving the kunoichi that guided him outside the room to guard. There were 4 figures seated in a semicircle facing the doorway, each figure matching their elderly description, and all female. He remembered each of their titles and appearances from Tokiwa's description during the tour. From left to right, there was the Elder of Education, Elder of Foreign Affairs, Elder of Census, and Elder of War, each title representing their duties, and tended to overlap in ways.
Lady Shizuka.
The Elder of Census began, responsible for managing the overall population and localized trade. It was primarily her, as well as the Elder of Foreign Affairs, that dealt with the matters that concerned the cultural law of marriage.
With the rumors, I can assume you've called for a meeting due to your new betrothed? Yes, census.
She addressed him by his job's title.
According to the cultural law that a kunoichi will marry a man who defeats her in combat, and considering I am the village leader, I had to confirm with the Elder Council. And this is the man.
The Elder of Foreign Affairs took a look at him.
Indeed.
Shizuka replied, making a motion to make introductions.
Greetings, esteemed elders of Nadeshiko.
He began.
I am Ains Owlgown, a traveler that came across Lady Shizuka and fought her in combat. Although I was unaware of your laws at the time, I had decided to fulfill the obligations in respect of your culture.
He left out certain information, such as there were other ninjas, that he met her this morning, and the actual reason behind the fight. Still, everything he said was the truth. He was indeed a traveler, just from another world. The Elder of War spoke up.
For the safety of Nadeshiko, may you remove your mask so we can see your face?
He was ready for this question, already having cast an illusion to disguise his head with a human appearance similar to Suzuki Satoru.
It is deeply personal for me to remove my mask, but I understand the concern for rogue ninja.
A rogue ninja, an individual that abandoned their duties to their village and left, was labeled a criminal and placed in the bingo book, which was this world's equivalent to an international wanted list. He would need to scour through the bingo book at a later point so to identify potential threats. He removed the mask of envy, revealing his Japanese face if altered a bit. As long as nobody physically interacts with the illusion, there shouldn't any issues. If they did, their hand would just pass through it, revealing the trick. Fortunately, they seemed to be satisfied with just seeing it. Shizuka, in particular, was staring a bit. He equipped the mask of envy again, causing her to break out of her stupor.
He's not in the bingo book,
Shizuka said in confirmation.
According to your form, you don't have any prior allegiances to other ninjas' villages.
The Elder of Foreign Affairs said.
We're glad that holds true.
I was honest in what I wrote,
Ains answered. The Elder of Education decided to speak.
I'm sure Lady Shizuka had explained, but I ask, are you aware of the duties you will hold and the position granted?
The various responsibilities and obligations had been detailed to me. I have prior experience in business and militant matters.
The former due to his experience as a salaryman, the latter due to Yggdrasil.
I have dealt with ninja before, and am confident in my ability to defend the village.
The Elder Council looked quite satisfied. Ains reasoned it was because the husband their leader caught was not a power-hungry individual. There were certainly cases before where a husband likely caused issues for the village, abusing his power and degrading Nadeshiko's long-term prosperity. This also probably occurs on a smaller scale, which is why newer generations are restricted to the lower hilltop, away from vital areas. Ains theorized that assassinations or subtle pressure kept such individuals from reaching a certain degree of power over village politics and the economy. Even if those husbands were stronger, there were many times when they could be vulnerable. He wouldn't have a problem with vulnerability, but that was because of passive resistance due to his race, job classes, and level. Not that Satoru planned on exploiting Nadeshiko village, but there could be ways to use its resources to satisfy personal curiosities while also benefiting it. A short-term loss for long-term gain benefits many companies. But there was also another reason why they were satisfied. Ains Owlgown had boldly stated a fact: that he was confident in defeating enemy ninja. This contrasted with Shizuka's previous lover, who could not defend himself and prevent his demise. Ains was openly challenging the elders to try and send Kunoichi to attack him. It was a bold move. The Elder of Kansas clapped his hands.
I think we can all agree to this marriage. The ceremony will be held at the week's end, 3 days from now. Of course, by this means you are now considered husband and wife at this moment.
He looked at Shizuka for an explanation. She answered.
The village leader's position doesn't grant much in the way of free time. The sooner the husband can help with her duties, the better.
So, they were basically married, just lacking a ring right now. Which meant he was now holding a position similar to a COO, with all its responsibilities tied. He would question why Shizuka was outside the village earlier if she didn't have much free time, but reasoned that searching for a suitable suitor was likely a cultural responsibility, a side job.
I look forward to working with you all. Please take care of me.
He made a small bow towards the elder council. If he treated them with respect and dignity, it would form a positive relationship between him and the main political force. This would work in the long term, as the familiarity would allow him to make bolder and bolder decisions while reinforcing Shizuka's leadership reputation, which had been stained by the accident. A good start helps a long way. Though he was almost a nervous wreck this entire meeting, the suppression of his emotions kept him calm.
In just a few minutes, Shizuka watched as Ain's wool gown had the elder council wrapped around his finger. In the time that Shizuka had been Nadeshiko village leader, she'd been fighting against the 4 elders tooth and nail to make any changes to the village, who refused to surrender and lose any political power and weight they had over her. Especially in the last year since the accident, which had them increasingly more stubborn to her decisions. Yet, her newly married husband, Ain's wool gown, had solved that issue in less than 5 minutes. He was in their good graces, to the point that Shizuka doubted they'd even send any kunoichi to test him. Who did she marry? What kind of individual could say just the right words, hide just the right amount of information? Could he have planned this entire meeting out? Did Shizuka even have to say anything? She'd been nervous in introducing him, anxious that the elders would begin their arguments and debates against her and Ain's. But his large figure walked in without concern, stood before them nearly still as a statue, and introduced himself with a voice oozing with confidence and clarity. An intangible aura seemed to emit from Ain's, radiating with authority. Yet he remained humble enough to treat the elders respectfully. How did he do it? Would she even remain the village leader after the ceremony? Or would she be a puppet attached to strings, moved to the whims and plans of Ain's wool gown? He was stronger than her, held the favor of the council. The kunoichi of Nadeshiko would obey his orders soon as well. His position second only to Shizuka and the elder council. She didn't know. Although her reputation had been stained, the majority of Nadeshiko village still treated her kindly. She had friends and family here. Shizuka cared for her kunoichi and the prosperity of Nadeshiko village. As the leader, she would be willing to sacrifice herself for the survival and advancement of the village, even if that meant marrying the man known as Ain's wool gown, a man of such intelligence and charisma to a degree of it being increasingly terrifying. And only Shizuka was aware of that.